everyone is here. So before we start the meeting, I have to read out a statement. It's welcome to the meeting of Inverclyde Integration Board. This meeting has been held remotely and will be filmed, recorded for live or subsequent broadcasts available through the Council website. The Integration Joint Board is a joint data controller with Inverclyde Council and NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, and under the General Data Protection Regulations and the Data Protection Act of 2018. This meeting will be broadcast and recorded to fulfil our public task obligation to enable members of the public to observe the democratic process. Data collected during this remote meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's published policies available through the Council website. Members of the Integration Joint Board are reminded that they should follow the IJB's established meeting protocol, including the use of the chat facility, including the use around the chat facility, and the comments made in the chat facility are visible to all participants in this meeting, which may include members of the public who also received invitations to this meeting. That is my public announcement over. So we're going to the agenda now, and I'm going to start with item 1, apologies, substitutions and declarations of interest.
Through you, Chair, we have apologies from Alan Cowan today, and yourselves taking the chair, and we've got apologies from Simon Carr. Are there any declarations of interest?
I'll declare my usual interest as being a board member in the Carer Centre.
Right, thank you for that. We move on to item 2A, which is the minutes of the meeting of Inverclyde Integration Joint Board on the 7th of November and the minute of the meeting of Inverclyde Integration Joint Board on the 28th of November. Has anyone got anything on the minutes? I don't see anything in the chat. Is anyone going to raise on the minutes? No, right, thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 3, which is financial monitoring report, and that's from Craig Given. Craig.
Yep, thank you very much. As always, this is a fairly extensive report, so what I'm going to do is just try and put in some of the highlights. At the end of this, and in additional to this, I was going to just give a very, very quick update, verbal update on the budget, but I was going to do the finance paper first, if that's okay. So the paper is saying at the end of period 7 up to the 31st of October, we've got a projected underspend of 1.083 million, and this assumes the earmarking of the 514,000, which is mentioned in the report, section 8.2, being approved. Under the social care side, we're expecting an underspend of £1.2 million in social care, and this is mainly due to vacancies in all areas within, and particularly underspends in external home care. Also underspends in mental health due to underspends in care packages. This is partially offset by overspends in physical and sensory due to client package costs as well. So on the health side, for the first time, we're actually projecting a small overspend of about £119,000. And this is mainly due, first of all, to a large overspend in mental health inpatient services. And this is largely offset by vacancies in most other areas. Prescribing has been the main movement for this period, where we are now projecting at this particular point in time an overspend of £500,000, mainly due to inflationary increases and short supply issues in the whole of our prescribing and pharmacy budgets. This is an issue which is national at this moment in time and has been caused by, as I've said there, a number of factors, including short supply of drugs and general hyperinflation in a number of areas within the prescribing world. Also within the report, we are looking and asking and requesting permission to earmark a number of our underspends in these particular following areas: £109,000 in ADRS, £250,000 for temporary posts, £63,000 for LD hub costs, and £92,000 for contribution to interim care beds. So I've also, within there, in the last few days, I have sent out the letter in relation to our COVID spend. We've sent out a letter that we got at the end of middle of last week, about the Scottish Government's intention and the mechanism that they're planning to use regarding that money being returned as such. The proposal is to take the money from reduce the amount going to health boards and wanting us to transfer that from our earmarked reserves back to the health boards. The last part of that is still subject to ongoing discussions, and tomorrow I'm involved in a CFO meeting which will hopefully give more information and more clarity around that particular part. The Transformation Fund is also mentioned in the report, and we started off the year at £1.975 million, and we plan to, at the moment in time, we have 605,000 remains uncommitted at this particular period. The capital position is started off at just over £12 million worth of budget, and we've had some slippage during the year of £784,000, and this will go into next year. This is mainly due to slight delay in the LD hub figures coming forward in the process and that. The earmarked reserves are there as well, and we started off the year with £28 million, and we expect to have £15.425 million at the end. It is my intention to bring back an update on earmarked reserves specifically as part of the budget paper, which is going to come forward next cycle. So I appreciate there's a lot of information there, and happy to take questions you may have on that.
Thank you, Craig. Once again, a very comprehensive financial report. I'm looking at the chat, and the first person who has a question for you is Martin McCluskey, and followed by Christina Boyd. Martin.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Craig, for the report. I've got kind of two bundles of questions, one around the COVID underspend and then some others. So I'll take the COVID underspend ones first, if that's okay. So just in terms of what you said there, and also some of the correspondence that has been happening over the weekend. So just so that I've got the position clear, the government have now realised that there isn't a way for them to claw back the money directly from IJBs. So it appears what they're suggesting is that health boards allocation from Scottish Government gets reduced by the amount that that is currently sitting in the reserves, and then it's for the health boards then to work out how to bring that money back from IJBs. Is that right?
I can't really speculate on the Scottish Government's thinking behind it. All I can say is what they've given to me in terms of the letter of facts, and what their suggestion is in the letter, that they reduce the amount from the health board. Yes. Okay.
So just then teasing this out, will this then be money that the health board will, and I understand if you might not have the answer to this yet, but just again, just to kind of try and bottom this out, will this then be money that the health board, this 4 million that's currently sitting, will the health board actually try and take that money back from us, or will there just be, is the proposal a negative allocation from the health board to the IJB?
I expect it to be a negative allocation to the IJB, but that's the bit we're still having the discussion on, and we'll hopefully know more.
Okay, great.
Tomorrow anyway.
So on that basis then, if it is a negative allocation, do we actually have clarity on the legal basis on which the health board will give us a negative allocation and reduce our grant by 4 million?
That's something I would need to ask that question, but I would have assumed that because Scottish Government have issued that letter, it will have been through their legal departments. That's certainly something that we can seek clarity on.
Right, because it seems, and I understand, Craig, this isn't a decision that you've made, so I'm not trying to hold you account for these decisions because they're decisions made by other people. But it would seem like, and this is obviously just speculating, that the Scottish Government obviously have not got a way to get this money back. So they've looked for a way through health boards to get it back, and now they're expecting health boards to try and claw that money back from IJBs, which really does kind of stick in the throat a little bit. But as a board member and just thinking about the legality of this, obviously this is something that we went round the houses on in September with regards to the Scottish Government mechanism. And I think now we're in the same position, but with regards to the health board. So, you know, as a board member, I wouldn't be comfortable, handing money back without full understanding of what the legal position is in relation to that money, because I think it also sets quite a dangerous precedent for IJBs. You know, for example, Inverclyde Council at the moment currently has a significant deficit in its funding, but you would see councils suggesting that we're going to provide a negative allocation to IJBs in order to try and fill part of our deficit, and that's basically the position that we're left in with regards to the health board and the IJB relationship here. So I would, I don't know if I need to move this formally as a motion or whether we can just have it noted in the minutes and decisions around this item, but I would move that, similar to September, we don't agree for this money to go back until we are fully aware as a board of the legal route through which the health board is pursuing this. And I would suggest that, you know, again, like September, that we don't, we should come back to have a full meeting around this once that clarity is provided by the health board, because I understand officers here at the IJB are obviously in a really difficult position because we aren't in full possession of the facts, partly because of the situation that the Scottish Government's left us in. But I think this, like September, we should come back again when full clarity is provided in order for us to have a proper discussion about this, because it is a significant sum of money. I don't know if I've got other issues on the financial report which aren't about this, but I know a lot of people are putting their hands up, Robert, so I don't know if maybe we want to have a discussion around that point first.
No, I think, Martin, you know, you've raised these issues. It's very important that we hear them at the moment. Now, I know Christina was going to make a contribution. I don't know if it's on the same subject. And Elizabeth Robertson is also wanting to make a contribution, as is Kate Rocks. So if it's on the same subject which Martin raised there, I'll start with Christina. If it's something else, we can wait until we could some feedback on what Martin was saying there. And also we have Anne. Anne would like to speak as well. So I'll start with Christina.
It's a different subject, Robert. Do you want to go on and take people who are talking about the finance before taking me, because it's a different subject?
Yes, I would appreciate that, Christina. Then, if that's the case, Elizabeth.
Hi, thanks. Thanks, Robert. I think I instinctively agree with Martin on this. The kind of complication, I think, is if it's a negative allocation, then it's quite hard to maybe do that tie back. So I think in terms of ascertaining what the legal position is, we have to kind of be nuanced about how we ask that, because it might be sought in a different way, via a negative allocation rather than a clawback, if you like. So I think if we're making the same request for what's the legal mechanism for this, then the nuance has to be based on the action that is proposed. That would be my only comment, but instinctively I agree with Martin on this.
I'm going to ask Anne from Unison to speak, and then Kate. Okay, Anne?
Yes, thanks, Chair. And actually, I'm from Unison, but I'm not on this board as Unison. I'm here as a non-executive board member. And my thoughts are, I think that what Martin has says and Elizabeth has says, I think we need to get the clarity on it. And I just wanted to clear up, it's not about handing the money back. It's about them not giving us the money in the first place, which I think is going to be very hard to try and say no to, because if the Scottish Government have done it to the health board, then there must be a legal way that they feel that that's acceptable and pass their legal department, and no doubt the health board will look at how their legal loop would be the fact that they would not give us the money in the first place. So it's not about clawing them back. It's okay to say I'm not giving them the money, but it's not about not giving them it. It's about it's not even getting it. So that's where we'd have to look at.
Hey, thanks, Anne. Right, Kate.
It was just Vicky has actually put a comment in. I was just going to suggest to you, Chair, to bring in Vicky in terms of some of the governance arrangements.
Well, I haven't seen her in the chat, so on you go, Vicky.
Thanks, through you, Chair. In relation to the governance arrangements, what I had suggested to Kate in my message was that it might be worth getting the Chair to send a letter to the Scottish Government expressing the IJB's concerns. And also I was suggesting that a further report comes back on the matter to members. I'm conscious that the next meeting of the IJB isn't until March, so I was suggesting that any report that came back would be circulated to members for a view. In relation to a specific motion refusing to provide money back, I don't think that's competent, but I think it's competent to seek further information and clarification over the legal status of what's being proposed by the Scottish Government. I hope that helps. Thanks.
Right, Kate.
I think that I can understand what the IJB are saying, and I appreciate that they're very supportive around how this is, where this goes, but I'd be keen that we explore what Vicky is suggesting in the first instance. I think we're the first of the run of the IJBs, so it would be useful to hear what some of the other IJBs, because this is a Greater Glasgow and Clyde issue too, and what is coming from them. But the letter to from the Chair to Scottish Government, I think that needs to be put to them, and a further report I would suggest to the IJB that would be something that we wanted to be thoughtful about.
Well, I know Martin had suggested a motion, but we're saying that wouldn't be appropriate at this juncture. So I think what we're saying here is that the Chair writes to the Government to seek clarification on the position of these funds, how them or the Health Board is intending to claw back. And until we have that legal definition, we're sort of all in limbo at the moment. So with that, I would imagine that the Chair writes to the Government to seek clarification, and a further report comes back to us when we can make a decision on it, which might be a motion. I don't know. Elizabeth.
I'm just wondering, thanks for bringing me back in, Chair, if it is the Scottish Government that we're writing to, or if it's the Health Board in this instance, because we know what the legal position is with the Scottish Government, and also just taking on board the point I was trying to make, it's not a clawback that's been suggested, it's an under allocation, if you like, so it's a slightly nuanced differentiation.
Hi, Will, that's right. How's the understood, right, Kate? On you go.
I think probably both. I think that's a really good point, Councillor Robertson. So it wouldn't do any harm to send it to Scottish Government saying our unhappiness as an IJB about being in this position, and that would be a follow-up from what we did before. But certainly I think that your suggestion around the Chair of the Health Board would be helpful too.
Right, Martin.
Thanks, Robert. I'm happy with the proposal that Vicky made there. I think I would also just want to add to that, however, just around, and maybe this is a point that can be addressed now rather than addressed in a report in the future, around the legal mechanism of either whether it's a clawback or whether it's a negative allocation, how that sits within the integration scheme and within our budgeting arrangements. Because with regards to the Health Board, because I'm not clear, I'm clear on how the IJB provides a direction to the integration partners, whether that's the Council or the Health Board, but I'm not clear how a decision that's been made kind of over here by the Scottish Government then can have a legal bearing in terms of our governance arrangements on our budget agreement with the health board, in the same way that I wouldn't understand it if it was with regards to our budget arrangements with the council. So I think that's just an additional point which might be addressed in a report.
Aye, Vicky.
Hi, thanks, Councillor McCluskey. I'm sorry I can't give a legal view just now, but I'll certainly go and look at the integration scheme. I'd also make the point that we're one of 31 other IGIBs who are going through exactly the same thing. So I'm sure that all of the various legal groups, so for example, our solar legal group, and in addition to Craig's finance groups, will all be discussing the same points. So as Kate said, we're the first IGIB to be discussing this openly. So at that point, there will be more information and more discussion about it.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say both Alan and I sit on the group which is chairs and vice chairs of all IGIBs FootsCom. There's a group that we're on as well. So I dare say it'll be high up that agenda as well. But in the meantime, I think that's what we do. We write to the government and the board to seek clarification, and Vicky will look at the integration scheme of delegation and find a legal terminology, hopefully, to let us know where we sit. Regarding the board, and if Martin quite says, the council as well. Is that all right, everyone? Thank you. Right, Christina.
I must say I find the faith in the government lawyers touching, but that's not my point at all. I'm on something else entirely. I notice yet again we've got an underspend in the care services for giving people care at home, and I was just wondering, has any thought been given to targeting the 300 people up at Amazon who are going to lose their jobs, to see if we can recruit any of those into the care sector, either for ourselves or for the private sector?
I've got Alan Stevenson busting to come in here. Alan.
Good afternoon, thanks Chair, through yourself. That's something Kate and I spoke about that right away. Obviously the task force have got a job to do, and the task force will actually be looking across the patch, but we would be delighted to interview and make that offer to the staff who would think they might want to have a job in social care as an alternative. Some attractions to that is some of the people probably working at Amazon are used to working shifts and things, so there's some natural tie-in in relation to that, and there might well be some people who think they want to do something completely different. So yes, we'd be very interested, and I'm sure through Councillor Moran, through the task force, there'll be formal processes put in place, but we've already discussed it as a team, and we'll get the opportunity to offer that for people to come forward if they've got an interest in coming to work for the HSCP.
Christina?
Yeah, that's fine. It's just that I've been reading all over the place about various employers saying that they're happy to help them. We don't want them all going to McGill's, right? Okay.
Yeah, I quite agree with you, Christina. And it's not just McGill's. I think the Glasgow Airport's looking for quite a few of them as well. They're up there at Gelsford for a week. No, I think it's important that we do present these opportunities to people who have been made redundant at Amazon. As Alan says, these people were very used to working weekends and night shifts and all the rest of it, so they would probably be highly suited for what we want. So we'll have a look at that, and we can talk to the task force and ask them how they're presenting the opportunities within health and social care. So on that one, Martin McCluskey has come back on with another question on the finance report. Martin.
Thanks, Robert. This is nothing to do with the COVID reserve. Just on 5.2, the overspend in relation to mental health inpatient services. I'm wondering if someone could just speak to that in a bit more detail, and whether this affects both the Orchard View / Willow Ward and the Lang Hill Clinic, and where these shortages are at the moment. I know that concerns have been raised publicly around staffing levels at Orchard View, and we obviously have an outstanding action on our rolling action list around the Mental Welfare Commission reports on the Lang Hill Clinic, and I think there is some some significant concern in the community just around staffing levels at both of these units. And I'm just hoping that someone might be able to just explain why we've got such shortages and how we're looking to rectify them, and also whether at both those units we are satisfied with the levels of staffing that we've currently got. Thanks.
Thank you, man. I don't know who, Kate?
So I don't know if I can answer all your questions, Councillor McCluskey. You appreciate that the head of mental health is off sick for now, but I will kind of try and answer some of it. I understand the overspend relates to the staffing and the use of bank to cover the wards to ensure that there's safe staffing. We've had issues about recruitment, particularly around consultant psychiatrists, so are reliant on locum cover and locum nurses. There is work ongoing, NHS, Greater Glasgow and Clyde wide, about some of the utilisation of the strategy for whole system working in mental health, and that is yet to reach a conclusion. But in the meanwhile, I have met with Una Graham and Martin Colshaw to look at what is our strategy to manage it safely. And we're going to be meeting again to look at, do we actually require the numbers of beds that we've got within the system, because not all of them are Inverclyde residents, and how we move forward. But it is an issue that we've actually been managing as an IGB in terms of that overspend for some time. I understand Craig could probably give me a better understanding of it, but there is work ongoing to try and rationalise what we're doing. But overspends as a result of the safe staffing. Now I've got Gillian Neil on. I don't know if Gail's here from mental health. Or just covering for Anne. I don't know if any of them could add anything to this. No. All right, Gail,
Gail, and then Diana wants to speak, but let Gail go first.
Yep.
I suppose Gillian's paper later on, thanks Chair, will cover some of this in terms of mitigating circumstances around medical. I've been subject to quite a lot of emails this week just in Anne's absence, and I suppose it is finding that longer term solution for medical cover and agreeing the rates of pay, because at this point in time it is very much reliant on locum cover. So it is about finding a sort of short, medium and long term solution to that. And again, in Anne's absence, we're probably, picking that up, but I appreciate the need for us to pick that up much quicker because of the sort of circumstances. So I'm happy for us to do a bit of work and bring that back at a later date for, whoever's covering it for Anne in the long term.
Thanks,
Thank you. Diana.
Hi, we've had overspends for inpatients' mental health for years now. That's partly because we have an intensive psychiatric care unit, and a lot of the patients in there require observations at one-to-one level, which means extra staff. And for some reason, the establishment on an IPCU is just the same as a normal ward. The unions have been talking to Carol Fitzharris, the inpatient service manager, about the low numbers of staffing because quite a number of staff have been injured in previous months. The other thing I suppose that we need to be aware of, it's gone out my head now, is that at the moment, not all the beds are fully occupied by Inverclyde residents. We are taking a lot of boarders from the rest of Greater Glasgow and Clyde, and quite often we're taking on very ill people. who are getting admitted from the rest of Greater Glasgow and Clyde, and they in turn need more intense observations, which means that we're needing more and more staff to look after these patients. We're short of staff anyway. The last I heard, I think we were 10 band 5 qualified nurses short for our 5 wards. It's a significant loss. It is something that's being worked on. There are meetings currently going on every week about winter pressures, and they are looking at this and seeing is there something that can be done so that when people are boarded into Inverclyde, we're not getting the illest of the ill, and we're maybe getting more stable people. But it is something that the health board's very aware of.
Thank you, Diana. Martin.
That's fine, Robert. Just thanks everyone for that information.
Right, that's fine. So we'll hopefully further down the line we will get a report about the services. Is that what Gail was saying? Yes. Okay. Right, thank you for that. Agenda item number 4 is the rolling action list. So I don't know if anyone has got any particular questions on the rolling action list. If you do, you could please raise them. I'm not going to go through every single one myself. So if there's anyone get any particular questions on this rolling action list, I'm quite happy to take it.
Chair, Craig is indicating he's got his hand up.
Right, Craig.
Sorry, Chair, there was just a couple of things that were kind of left over from the last item there. First of all, it was everybody happy to approve the paper and the earmarked reserves being created? It's just a point of note for the minute, if that's okay.
That's fine. Sorry about that, Craig.
No
Everybody happy to recommendations on the financial report? Agreed?
Agreed.
Right, thank you. Right, back to the rolling actions. Has anyone got any particular questions on rolling actions? If not, I'm just going to move on to the next item on the agenda. Which is item 5, and it's the proposal to fund the final year MSc social work students to commit to work in Inverclyde. And I think, Kate?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that, Chair. Alan Stevenson's had to go to.
You had to go, actually, I'm asking yourself, yeah.
No, that's fine. Just to kind of take you through it, obviously this is a strategy that we have developed to try and fill the gap around our recruitment crisis, and it is a crisis within social work. We have a crisis in social work as much as social care. So we went and looked at a variety of proposals and felt that we did a profile of the experience across the workforce and felt that what we needed was to bring in people that are generally that were coming with second careers, and the Masters in Social Work generally provides you that, and probably a bit more mature are the students. We can't compete with other local authorities in terms of the pay differentials, they're quite significant. We spoke to the universities at the time to test this out, and there was some appetite from the universities to say that they would be able to not only just circulate that and publicise it across the students, but they could work with us to find potential students that they felt that they were ready to take that step in a career in statutory social work, because not everyone goes in to statutory social work. We had a look at what we anticipate our demand would be, and we currently have 10 vacancies, and so we're hoping that part of the recruitment campaign today that will progress will be successful in getting 10 Masters students or qualified social workers with master's students. This has been to the scrutiny panel, like members have agreed this approach, and it really is to come to the IGB today to agree the funding for this initiative to make sure that we're stabilising the workforce across the board. So I don't really have anything else to add to this. But
Thank you. Elizabeth Robertson.
Thanks, Chair. I think this is a great paper and absolutely the right thing to do, and very happy to support it. The question that I've got is this seems to have kind of happened like in a kind of kablamo kind of a way. We talk about workforce planning, we talk about succession planning, and we've talked about it quite with a degree of urgency, but not panic over the years. We've not, you know, this seems to have come right out of left field, and I'm just wondering if we've got an explanation as to why that's the case, and also if there's anything that we need to kind of, if we're not horizon scanning far enough, that we need to kind of maybe do to make sure that we don't see a similar situation or can fend off a similar situation in other professional fields.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Obviously, I've asked the same questions as you know, because obviously I haven't been here and can't comment. What I've been told, it has been really stable for many a year, and the pandemic, I think it just brought it to a bit of a head, that people started to reflect where they wanted to be coming out of the pandemic, and a lot of people were at nearly retiring age and decided that they wanted to go. But I actually think that I've been reassured, because one of the service managers actually told me on Friday that our vacancy position has slowed right down, and in the last couple of months, and I think that there's more of a certainty around the management and the leadership that's going into the HSCP that previously was, because we've had key vacancies for a number on and off for a number of years, and that's created some of the uncertainty too, with a very inexperienced social work population. The main vacancies were sitting in children's services, and I'm a wee bit more reassured that we're stabilising it. I've also asked one of the heads of service to take the lead on it, that we are truly looking at that, and that we start not only with this initiative to immediately respond to the crisis we're in, but also to look at how do we sustain this moving forward. And there will be other proposals that are coming to the IGB about us growing our own, and particularly given the opportunities to within from the social care workforce, because that's a workforce that has to be developed and people need to see career paths, but also to the people of Inverclyde in a way that we would have done maybe years ago. So we're exploring that as it currently stands, and there will be a paper coming in the next 6 months about growing your own. So I hope that provides some reassurance.
Thank you.
Right, I have a question from David Gould, then Diana McCrone, and then Mark McCluskey and Christina Boyd. So, David.
Thank you, Chair. I'd absolutely echo what Elizabeth has said here. I strongly support this paper. I'm very much a believer in lifelong learning, so this is certainly very much music to my ears. What I'm interested in, I'm not necessarily looking for an answer right now, is how this approach ties in with our overall approach to recruitment and retention. I'm thinking with regards to modern apprenticeships, degree apprenticeships and graduate apprenticeships in particular, because if we can get people in and see ourselves as an attractive employer as part of their education, whether that's school going onwards, I think that's a really good way of getting more people into the organisation and keeping them as well. So I'm just interested in, you could just comment on it briefly, and then it might be something perhaps you come back to at a later date.
No, just to give you a comment back, David, we completely agree, and that's part of the strategy that we're looking at, and Grow Your Own is much bigger than just social workers. We've got huge vacancies in business support, home care, so we need to look at it across the board. It's not just with social work. The social work bit is particularly difficult because we can't fulfil our statutory functions, and there's a level of risk that you run because of the nature of the social worker task. But we have a real challenge in Inverclyde, and our depopulation doesn't help it, particularly with our young people. So there's a bit of work that we're going to be doing with education. We need to rebrand social work and social care.
Thank you, Kate. Right, Diana.
Hi, I was just being nosy in terms of what exactly is it we're funding. Are we paying tuition fees? Are we paying a sort of cost of living amount, or are we taking them on as employees in a way? Or I just wondered how you were basing this funding.
Well, the funding will pay off there. For master's students in social work, unlike other degrees, every other degree apart from social work, the SAS, Scottish Student Awards funding pays for masters, but not for social work. So people have to take a bank loan out to become a qualified social worker. So basically, we'll be paying off any loan that they will have incurred to undertake this training, because they do not get access to government funds for the training. You can get an award from the SSSC up to 3,000, but the social work postgraduate qualification can cost from 12,000 up to 24,000, depending on which university establishment you attend. So that's a big ask. It's something that the Scottish Government are currently looking at. I think that the universities put the prices up just through time, and the award that was given at the very or the bursary, as the SSSC calls it, I don't know if it's kept up in time, but the maximum is 3,000, where you've got the cheapest masters per year, and it's a 2-year course for social workers, not a 1-year course. 2-year course is 6,000 up to 12,000 a year. So either 12 or 24 over the 2-year period. We would be paying roughly about 15,000 because we've just aggregated it. Okay.
Thank you, Kate. Are you quite happy with that, Diana?
Yes, thanks. I know it's difficult to give an exact amount. I just wondered on what sort of basis the money was being paid, and especially if we're going to start training our own, then it's something that we'll need to consider for other staff, maybe.
Right, Martin.
Thanks, Robert. Kate, I think it's a great idea, and I'm also quite pleased that we've seen, like, across this IJB meeting and the last one, like, innovative ways of using kind of what we've got at our disposal. So at the last meeting, the section 12 and 22 money, and this time funding for social work. And I'm just wondering how we might kind of apply the same sort of thinking to other areas. So I'm thinking specifically around home care, where we've obviously got recruitment challenges, and we've also got a significant underspend in the budget that we've just seen. Like, is there any way that we can apply a sort of similar kind of way of thinking to get some of the money in that underspend out the door in a way that might help us recruit home care workers as well? I know this is kind of slightly taking it off the topic of this paper, but just, you know, thinking about how we might use some of those reserves to solve our recruitment processes.
No, I don't think that's a bad idea. I don't think we've looked at it specifically through the lens of home care, because we try to take a risk basis. Actually, we're doing okay in the recruitment of home care. We recruited 25, have just came in the last week. I think it's so we've got more people coming forward. We will have a paper that will go to IGB. I think it will go to the May IGB, or maybe I can't remember, on March. It won't be the March one anyway, it'll be the next one after that. and actually there'll be a paper about the redesign of home care, and part of it will be to look at what we want that workforce to look like in the future, bearing in mind that the focus has all been on care homes. But if we asked our residents of Inverclyde, no one wants to go into a care home. None of us want to go into a care home. They want to be supported at home. So we're trying to kind of do something a bit different, and that includes the modern apprenticeships, as David Gould was suggesting, and getting young people into our home care service, and it being seen as something quite different. We have to do a wee bit of a rebranding exercise, and what that looks like, because, and we're hoping part and parcel of some of the work will be to look at the grade that we pay home carers in the first instance. But I think we should take away and think about that. But we will certainly have a paper for you in the next 6 to 8 weeks with a different proposal about home support and how we need to take things forward.
Right, thank Christina.
I mean, this is definitely a fantastic suggestion, and I'm sure it will help. I mean, my question is, from reading, I take it we didn't invent this idea, and there are other similar schemes out there. So why would somebody who's doing an MSc in social work, why would they take our scheme rather than maybe a scheme that one of the other councils is giving? Is their scheme better, different? What would be the attraction to take on our scheme?
Nobody's doing that yet, Christina. We're the first, okay? I suspect others will follow, but we're the first. Most of the other local authorities are paying higher, which we can't do. Glasgow pay about £8,000 more a year for a social worker. West Dun pay more too. So a lot of our neighbouring local authorities pay better. If we can get these social workers in, we can stabilise the workforce, and then we can start looking at what social workers really want, which is about caseloads that are proportionate, that are allowing them to do quality work and helping them to see the outcomes. It isn't always about money. The other thing that some other local authorities are doing are giving them a shorter working week. So there's all these incentives, but as far as I'm aware, we are the first to pay for the masters, the student fees.
That's absolutely brilliant. I hadn't realised that. At that rate, we should get the cream of the crop before anyone else jumps on the bandwagon. Brilliant.
Well, that's what we hope.
Anyone get any other questions for Kate on that? No. The recommendation, the Integration Joint Board has asked to agree the funding aspect of this proposal. The responsibility to ensure HSCP has sufficient registered social workers across the service sites with the Chief Social Work Officer. That is a recommendation. Do we agree it? I take it the silence is yes.
Agreed, yeah.
Agreed.
Agenda item number 6 is just the routine decisions and items for noting. So I don't think anyone's got anything on that. We'll move on to number 7, which is the rollout of naloxone training in Gael.
Sorry, Chair, agenda item number 6 is actually a verbal update in relation to service pressures. I think Kate was going to provide an update.
I will, not because I don't have any papers, I'll just sail through it. So my mistake, Kate. Sorry about that. I don't have any papers.
This is a request from the Chair and the Vice Chair about an update around the impact on primary care. So Dr. McDonald is with us today, so he's going to give us an overview, and Alan Best is here too, so they can pick up any other questions that the IGB may have about primary care at this moment in time. I have to appreciate that there isn't a board-wide data set that we can easily provide, but we felt that we wanted to provide some measure of assurance to the IGB about the current position within Inverclyde. So can I hand it over to Dr. MacDonald?
Yes, you should, right.
Okay, thanks, Kate. Thanks, Chair.
Right, Doctor.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you can.
Yep, that's fine. So I'll just I'll give a relatively brief update, including covering a little bit about the out-of-hours service, and obviously take questions at the end of that then. So firstly, just to really set the scene, we have 13 GP practices now in Inverclyde, and all are now, all should be and are seeing patients face to face. Most practices, having learned from the pandemic, are obviously offering telephone, video, and also asynchronous consultations, which is consultations via email or similar. We have 2 of our practices within the area currently subject to list closures. Now that means that they are unable to take new patients at the moment due to pressures of work and staffing. The practices in that situation are still allowed to, or will still take on relatives of current patients, such as newborn babies and family members moving home, but they will not be able to take on any additional patients. Practices at the moment are, as per other areas of the health service, are finding that they have to prioritise unscheduled and urgent care. A lot of that over the past few weeks, as you know, have been with the increases in influenza A, strep A, and the increase over the festive period of COVID again. And this may, certainly over the past few weeks, has been causing a delay in some routine care for patients. As I mentioned, the pressures in general practice have been based on these high rates of infective illness, as well as pressures post-pandemic on secondary care waiting lists for outpatient appointments and delayed operations, which obviously, when patients are faced with that challenge, often turn to their GP to update them on their medical condition, ask for further medication or further treatment whilst they're waiting. Well, obviously, we've also noticed increased patient demand post-pandemic. I think a lot of people put things on the back burner and didn't want to bother services during that time. Many of them are now seeking help. In addition, we have we've seen quite an increase in the number of new Scots arriving over the past year within Inverclyde, and many of them bring complexities with language barriers and cultural differences, as well as complex health needs. GP practice workload issues are not new, and obviously the reason that our new 2018 contract was developed. Recruitment issues, the pandemic, and funding issues, which we've covered here before, means that at this stage we've not fully implemented the 2018 contract. The longer term issues with GP recruitment and retention are complex, but do relate in a great deal to workload demands and also, to a lesser extent, pension issues. What we'd say, and sort of debunking perhaps some of the concerns expressed in some media outlets, that there's no evidence at present that increased A&E numbers are being caused by GP practice lack of capacity. And indeed, and my colleague Chris Jones is on the call and may want to comment on this, but there's A&E attendance that actually at present are lower than pre-pandemic numbers, but the challenges the hospital face are more due to the flow of patients and patients being in hospital perhaps longer than they've intended, as well as getting people out of the A&E departments. Just to cover the out-of-hours service, I know there's been some comments about that recently, and so the out-of-hours service, or the GP out-of-hours service, is a separate service which covers the whole of GG&C and is hosted by Renfrewshire Health and Social Care Partnership. Inverclyde residents access the out-of-hours service via NHS 24, and there's a local presence via visiting car and at weekends between 8 and 2 on Saturdays and Sundays, as well as full days on public holidays. Out with those times, patients are asked to go to the Royal Alexandra in Paisley, but where patients don't have access to their own transport, there is a patient transport service that can collect and take them to the Royal Alexandra. The out-of-hours service are in regular dialogue with us as an HSCP regarding updates on moving that service forward for the residents of Inverclyde. And one change they're looking at implementing following recent looking at numbers suggested that the appointments actually in the Inverclyde up at the hospital, the out-of-hours service, were actually not all being filled. And it was thought that this may be due to the hours that were offered, because they're perhaps too early in the morning to catch the peaks in demand, which tend to happen in early afternoon. So there is a proposal to change the opening times from the current 8 to 2 to 10 to 4 to be able to better capture the peak times and to avoid pressures elsewhere in the system. So that's my piece. I don't know if Alan Best has anything he'd like to add before we go to questions.
Alan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just as Hector's saying there, we recognise there is challenges within the primary care sector and the wider health care sector. Just as Hector said there about colleagues, GP colleagues, we also see recruitment and retention challenges in the wider community nursing and allied health professional colleagues' professions. And that's something, as we've talked earlier about within social care and social work, that's again something that we're working hard to ensure that we're able to supply the critical services that we require to have supporting the community. Post-COVID, these services still continue to support our care home community, both nursing and residential, and you'll have heard through previous IGB's feedback in terms of the work of the Care Home Collaborative. There is a challenge out there. Colleagues are working extremely hard. I think there has been issues where post-COVID, as Kate was saying earlier, where folk have chosen perhaps to move away from the profession a bit earlier than anticipated in their work plan. Although NHS Glasgow and Clyde have started a kind of retire and return type process, which we're starting to see staff using that option. So again, we are endeavouring to make sure that our vacancies are filled as quickly as we possibly can do, but we are within the greater NHS Glasgow and Clyde pool very much dependent on folk wishing to work within the Inverclyde community, and we're looking at kind of, I say, innovative ways so that folk can recognise that the stretch of motorway between Inverclyde and the other part of the system isn't quite as long as thought of, and looking at ways about how we can support folk to do that. So the important thing is that our community recognises it doesn't, in some cases it's the right service at the right time, so in many cases it's not actually going to the GP first, but accessing through community pharmacy, optician, or other forms of health support and advice, and also self-referral to services to try and make sure that we're getting folk into the services as quickly as we can do. So happy to take any questions.
Right, the first question is from Mark McCluskey and then David. Martin.
Thanks, Robert, and thanks, Hector, for that update. It's really useful. I think just before I kind of say anything or ask any questions on this, I think it's just important to know the work that you and your colleagues are all doing and just how much pressure you are all under. And I think the pressure that we're seeing in acute hospitals at the moment and the waiting times for treatment is probably a large part of the reason why GPs are being overwhelmed at the moment, with people returning maybe 2 or 3 times where before they just see their GP once. So I don't think, I think it's just worth putting on record that I don't think anyone, I would hope that no one is blaming GPs for the delays that we're maybe seeing. We know that it's all about pressures elsewhere in the service. Just to pick up on a few things, a couple of questions, just if you were able to expand on it. You mentioned about the funding for the 2018 contract and the funding challenges, and meaning that the 2018 contract hasn't been fully put in place. I'm just wondering if you could say a little bit more about that and where the where the funding challenges actually lie. And in a similar kind of vein, one of the things we obviously discussed at a previous IJB is around the primary care improvement plan and the removal of funding in year for some of the primary care improvement plan, enabling you to maybe recruit things like people like advanced nurse practitioners and others. And I'm just wondering, looking ahead into future financial years, how important that funding around the primary care improvement plan will be to relieving some of these pressures around general practice. And then just a couple of comments around out of hours. I think, you know, the out of hours service, there's obviously an ongoing discussion at health board level about this, and I think it is something that concerns a lot of people in the community. And I know that you heard it yourself when you came along to the Port Glasgow Community Council meeting a couple of months ago. Like, you know, this isn't just councillors and elected representatives, you know, implying that there's an issue. There is actually an issue that people feel very strongly about. And I think, first of all, that the lack of consultations, and again, I know this isn't your direct responsibility, but just to kind of, you know, vocalise this, the lack of consultation so far on what was a major service change from where we were in kind of January 2020 to where we are now, I think is something that concerns people. And I think that when we do come to the point of consultation, I think it is important that it is seen as a major service change and that it is something that is fully consulted on. You know, the survey, the petition that's doing the rounds among Inverclyde residents at the moment against the situation out of hours at the moment has 5,600 names on it. You know, so there hasn't been a public consultation, or if there has been one, it's been very limited, but 5,600 names on a petition purely from Inverclyde just shows the strength of feeling around this. And, you know, I have sympathy with the challenges that people face around providing a reliable out of hours service, but one of the questions I can never really get a proper answer on is, you know, why the service can't be located in Inverclyde and people from Paisley could maybe be expected to travel here instead, if not on every night, then at least on some of those evenings. And just on the point about the opening hours, I think there's an issue around NHS 24 here. Like, I had to visit out of hours over Christmas, and what the doctors there were telling me was one of the issues they're finding about those early morning isn't that it's not that there's a lack of demand for out of hours at those times, it's just that the patients can't get through quickly enough. You know, so I know from phoning myself for a relative for an out of hours appointment at 7 AM, as soon as I got through to the Flow Navigation Centre for Greater Glasgow and Clyde, it was very quick, but it was the amount of time that was spent on hold with NHS 24 that meant it was 10 AM before I could actually get an appointment, but I was calling from 7 AM, and I'm sure there's a similar issue. Like, appointments could probably be filled all the way from 8 till 4 if the backlog in NHS 24 was dealt with. So I don't think it's just an issue in the out of hours that GGC is responsible for. It's also a bigger issue in terms of the flow through NHS 24 to the Greater Glasgow and Clyde Flow Navigation Centre. I think that was probably all the points. And the final point, I know this isn't one for you, Hector, but I don't know if we're going to also touch on dental at all as part of primary care. Or if that might be something for a future meeting, because obviously there's big issues in primary care and dental as well as with GPs. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Martin. Hector, you want to respond, Martin, before I ask David to come in?
Yeah, I suppose there was quite a lot there. So I suppose in reverse, yeah, I probably don't intend to talk about dental today, because that's probably a whole other issue, which I think we've probably covered at the meeting before. And in terms of the out of hours, yeah, I acknowledge what you're saying, and I think that's why there's particularly, as you said, the flow issues through NHS 24. I think that's one of the reasons about moving they've looked at the peak times of demand once people get through the initial phone system at NHS 24, and by the time the demand comes on patients to be seen, it does tend to be, you know, maybe later in the morning to early afternoon. Hence the intention to sort of move the limited resource they have at the moment to sort of cover the busier times, and so that more people can be seen locally. In terms of the financial side of things, I think there's probably a national agreement that, you know, the aspirations of the contract probably, you know, the level of staffing required to actually fulfil what was agreed, particularly around the delivery of pharmacotherapy services, and some of the stuff around vaccinations and scheduled care probably was the level of funding probably doesn't reflect the amount of work once we've seen sort of practical levels of staff required to deliver those services. So that's one element of it, and as the other, as you mentioned, is as we've talked about at this meeting previously, is the need of the government to claw back some of the unspent funding, which I think we acknowledge was not recurring funding, but I think we could have, I guess, if we'd still had that, used that at least for short-term use in order to help perhaps break some of the backlog in our primary care services. But I think we kind of covered that before. I think that's probably all I'll say on that.
David.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Hector and Alan, for the presentation, the update. Really appreciate it. From my perspective, I'm really interested to investigate a little bit more in terms of we've got, I think you mentioned we had 2 practices who are no longer taking on patients. I'm just wondering, in terms of our overall capacity of GP primary care services, I'm just wondering how long we can continue to effectively meet the increased level of demand and service post-COVID. You mentioned the challenges we've got in recruiting and retaining not just GPs, but nurse practitioners and non-clinical staff as well. I'm wondering at what point the demand simply becomes too great for the available supply of service. I mean, how close are we at the tipping point? Is that still a way off? And if it is coming, what can we do to actually address it proactively instead of waiting for it to hit us? Sorry, that's a very big question, and I don't expect you to have the answers necessarily, but I'm just trying to get a sense of at what point do we need to have more interventions, more effective interventions?
Right. So we have I mean, obviously one of the aspects of my role as clinical director is to have dialogue with practices who are feeling that they're struggling, and one of the mechanisms by which practices respond when they feel that they can't meet current demand is to request something like a list closure. What list closures do is allow practices some time to maintain their practice list at a manageable level, or indeed just by natural patients moving away, unfortunately maybe some patients dying, the list size would naturally then decrease. And it also allows practices a little bit of time to plan how they will deal with things going forward. And one of the reasons that we have the independent contractor model is that actually the ways of dealing with it in different parts of the board, or even different parts of our HSCP, will be different because of the different natures of our population, the different needs. I think, as I said at the beginning, obviously GP practices are sort of having to move in some cases to prioritising the unscheduled and urgent, aspects of care, and I think that at the moment, unfortunately, I think we've maybe passed the peak of these illnesses that I mentioned, the flu, COVID, and strep A, and anecdotally from colleagues locally, we've seen some fall off, and I think public health figures would support that. But you're right. I mean, the issues here are national, probably not just Scotland, but certainly the UK wide. And I don't think I have a magic answer to that. I mean, I think, as Alan mentioned, ensuring that we have, the health professionals allocated within the new contract, so the advanced nurse practitioners, the increased pharmacy support, in order that we are freeing the GPs up to do the more complex and elements of the job, and I think that's something that's difficult culturally for people to come to terms with, because I think what that means for a lot of people is that you won't necessarily, when you call the practice, always be seeing or speaking to the GP. It may be that that it is somebody else within the practice team who has got better set of skills for dealing with that particular issue, and that allows the GPs to concentrate on the more complex multimorbid patients or those with palliative care needs. So I'm afraid you're right. It was a big question, and I don't really have all the answers today. I think there's multiple factors. I think the Westminster government probably do need to, or whoever's in power at Westminster probably do need to address the pension issues, which are not just affecting senior doctors, but other people working within that work within the public sector, as that is stopping a lot of people, as Alan mentioned, coming back into or staying on at work, and it's also preventing people taking on extra work. So that's one issue. And although attempts to recruit more GPs is ongoing, it takes at the moment at least 7 years to train a GP, 7 or 8 years. So even if that process is ongoing, it can still take a number of years to have them actually at the front line. Sorry, I think Alan wanted to come in.
Yeah, it's okay, Chair.
Thank you, Hector.
Through yourself, Chair. Yeah, just as Hector was saying there, I think, and I mean this is a fairly complex situation that we're looking to see about where we can mitigate, but also sort of develop services. And as Hector said there, I think extending the scope of a practitioner, an allied health professional, or as we're seeing with our advanced nurse practitioners, who are highly skilled individuals. And I'll have to be honest, in some cases, it's maybe more appropriate for them to see the service user than the GP in terms of how that kind of wider patient management, as Hector says, allowing the GP to do that specialist medical care. So that's why it's through the primary care plan that we have invested heavily in our ANP workforce. But that's a bit of a slow burner because it takes quite a time to actually start to build up that expertise. But once it's there, the second part of the secret is to retain that individual, because obviously there's a lot of pull across the system. So that's where in Inverclyde we have focused working together to make sure that all the multidisciplinary team are focused in facing this challenge to support our colleagues within the GP community. And I think also, as Hector's alluded to, also the staff that work within the GP surgeries as well, that the logistics behind supporting GP surgeries, these folk are working really, really hard, whether it's on telephones. I know there's sometimes frustrations around phones, but there's not a single individual that's not committed to try and make sure that the service user is getting to see the right person at the right time.
Thank you, Alan. That was very helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alan. On the aspect, people, they do complain about receptionists, trying to get through to a doctor. And I've been reassured with some doctors that these people are very highly skilled in what they do. Receptionists, when they ask the questions and such, like before you could get an appointment with a doctor, or indeed a nurse practitioner. But my question for Hector and yourself is, what happens to people that slip through the net here? You don't always get everyone on a phone or a conference call. There is people slipping through the net who are effectively been misdiagnosed, or even worse, dying because they're not getting the proper consultation with a doctor. And sometimes the nurse practitioner may be skilled, but they probably maybe give the wrong diagnosis out. So is there anything there where if somebody was to phone in, they have a trigger point or something to highlight, say, this particular person needs to see someone, not a phone? Now, we are inundated with people complaining to us about such things happening. So is there a process where someone phones in, will be highlighted, this needs someone to see someone, they're on a nurse? Is a mechanism for that, Hector? So
I suppose that may vary in process depending on the practice. I think one of the purposes in the receptionist taking information is that is usually relayed to the practitioner who will be dealing with the person. And receptionists do receive what's called signposting training, which basically means that they can, from the clinical information given, help to signpost where things are obvious, for example, to community pharmacies, to optometrists, podiatrists, so that the patient isn't having to come to the GP first and then maybe being put onto that service. I think receptionists usually present that information to the clinician, whether it be the GP or the advanced nurse practitioner, and that then allows them to decide, within what priority that person needs to be seen, i.e. the same day or even very quickly, and also who might need to see that patient. And usually that information can help. I think, Chair, that most of the practices should be now moving back to a model where patients can book appointments, without being called on the telephone first. Now, that may not be the same for every practice, but I think certainly, Port Glasgow Health Centre, the practices here certainly have that model. So patients at the moment calling us are given the option of choosing, whether they want a telephone, video, or face-to-face consultation. And as you might expect, I think the vast majority of people are choosing face-to-face at present, maybe around 80%, I would say, from our figures. I think giving that information to the receptionist, though, still does help us. On occasion, we sometimes phone people and say, "Oh, I'd like to see you sooner," or "Can you get some tests before you come in, because the receptionist has told me that this is the problem." So giving the reception that information is really useful. In terms of people slipping through the cracks, it's difficult. I think, as with any pressure system, any health professional can sometimes misdiagnose something, on the first occasion. I think important things in our training are always that, things are, we do something called safety netting, which means that, should things deteriorate, we tell the patient what to do in that situation, because sometimes catching an illness at a certain point in time the symptoms may not have fully developed. We may not know how serious it is. So it's usually key that we obviously inform people that they should be back in touch should things deteriorate. But I don't think there's any perfect system, that can't altogether eliminate, situations where people deteriorate. But I think most practices have system in place where they should be able to pick those up and spot the deteriorating patient.
Thank you, Hector. As I say, it's just that, even the other day there, was on the telly, a young man at 26 who was misdiagnosed. He had a abscess in his brain, and when the practice nurse said, "I think you're feeling sorry for yourself. He's no longer with us." And the GP was on answering the question, says, "That should never happen. We should have been trigger points along that route where we could have found out what was wrong there." And going forward, I hope that we take cognizance of that and make sure that we do try and make sure everybody gets the diagnosis that they need at that particular time. Okay, thanks for that, Hector. Anyone else got any questions? Okay, right. Thank you for that. Item 7 is a rollout of naloxone training. Gail Kubloon. Gail.
Hello, thank you, Chair. This is just given the IGB an oversight of the current position of the naloxone training rollout. This follows on from a council motion in September which sought to mandate naloxone training across all HSCP staff. The Alcohol and Drug Partnership has employed a naloxone link worker since October 2021, and that's to roll out training across all their ADP partners, including third sector, organisation and the wider communities. This is in addition to the work that's already undertaken by Inverclyde Alcohol and Drug Recovery Service, which for many years has trained staff, distributed naloxone to service users, and on very rare occasions administered naloxone. ADRS have rolled this out to the homeless team, and they provide ongoing clinical support and oversight this work within the homeless service to support staff confidence if they actually have to administer naloxone. We know the cohort of people who are most likely to die of a drug-related death, and we know that most people die in their own homes, in their own domestic setting, or that of others. And that's why people like community pharmacists, Scottish Families Against Drugs, and other third sector providers also distribute naloxone. More recently, Scottish Ambulance Service and Police Scotland, in the form of nasal spray, they also administered naloxone. We sought advice from the Chief Social Work Officer for this paper to propose a voluntary action to administration of naloxone, as we're aware that staff need to be willing, able and confident to respond in an emergency situation, and it's not for everybody, so that's why we agreed a voluntary approach. The success in naloxone awareness is the wider rollout to the Inverclyde community, and we recently had a session for elected members where the naloxone coordinator delivered that training. The naloxone coordinators developing a wider timeline to support the rollout across Inverclyde into the wider HSCP and wider community as part of our overall harm reduction work. The paper in the appendix outlines the activities to date of the naloxone coordinator, and from this point forward in January 2023 we've ordered an additional 300 kits, and the plan is to provide naloxone and overdose awareness training to the wider community, and will prioritise areas including shops, licensed premises, buses, taxis, etc. And really the ongoing HSCP and council services and refresher training for anybody that needs it. So it's just to give the IGIB an overview of the continued rollout of the training. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Gail. As I said before, Gail, I undertook a training as well with our elected members, and I found it really useful. Charlie was really good in his training, and I looked on it as part of my first aid, sort of training, my first aid kit, and now I've added an naloxone kit to my first aid kit, and that's the way I think it's just a tool I've got for any time out of the emergency happens. Then if that's the emergency that takes place, then I can deal with it. So I'm really glad I took a training, and I'm glad I have my kit now. So well done to. I wasn't completely happy when he brought it to the motion to the council, because I thought he's missing a point, but I'm glad I was proved wrong, and I'm glad I'd done the training, and as I say, I have the kit in my first aid kit in my car. So thanks everyone. So anyone else, any questions on the naloxone training? Yes, Charlene.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Gail, for the report, which was really informative. And I note that you said that it's an overdue. And I read with interest about the number of kits that are being distributed by the naloxone worker. But I was curious, just in terms of, do we have any sense as to how many naloxone kits are actually in circulation within Inverclyde, just based on some of those different agencies you said that are now carrying them? I think, if my memory serves me, there's some targets around that, and I was just wondering how we're doing in terms of our progress towards those targets.
Yeah, thanks for yourself, Chair. We've actually exceeded our target, Charlene, and that's really because the target is measured against the drug-related deaths in the area. So because the numbers of drug-related deaths halved last year, we've exceeded our target. I think once the kits go out, it's really difficult to then keep an eye on what's current, because other people are bringing them in. So that's probably something for future that we can look at through the EDP as to who else is getting kits from other sources and how we can try and collate it a bit more centrally. I think that would be something for the EDP committee. And probably, you know, for them to measure that better. As I say, we measure it from an ADRS point of view, and I keep on top of the measurements from the naloxone coordinator, because that's a target we've been setting. I need to make sure that we meet the target that we've been given through those sources. but I'm well aware that there'll be lots of people wider. We had a recall earlier on in the year, so while we were able to do the recall of the kits that we knew about, it was really tricky to work out who else had, but I think through the ADP we could do a bit of work on that.
All right, Charlene. Martin.
Thanks, Robert. Just a really quick one. Given that this came from a member's request at the council, how will we report back to the council and to the member who put up the request, just to close that loop?
I see Kate's got her hand up. Can I let her answer that?
Kate? I think you're on mute, Kate.
My understanding from that discussion, Councillor McCluskey, is that it was to report to the IGB with an update around the plan and where we were with the rollout of naloxone. And then it was to be remitted back to the social work scrutiny panel. We have one on the 23rd, so I would imagine that we would want to be taking that paper to the social work scrutiny panel. Because the motion came from there, if I remember.
I think that's probably the best vehicle for it to come back to the scrutiny panel.
Unless Vicky's got an alternative view, of course.
No, I'm happy with it going back to the social care.
Aye. It was a motion at full council, Vicky, you know, so I think back at the scrutiny panel would be more appropriate. Well, we just confirm that we'll continue to offer training in naloxone on a voluntary and a mandatory basis. Okay, agree with that?
Agreed.
Agenda item number 8 is the advanced clinical practice update. And Gail, are you going to speak to this? Because obviously Anne's not here. Or is that Kate?
No, it's actually Gillian that's going to speak.
All right. She used to have told me beforehand, Kate.
I know. Sorry, I thought I had.
No, you never. Gillian.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Gillian Neal, the Mental Health Programme Manager for the Health and Social Care Partnership. This paper was really just an update on our advanced clinical practice developments within mental health services in Inverclyde. Those were developed during 2021, approved at the end of 2021, and have been in progress over the last year and a bit now. So this is really just an update for noting the initial plan has not shifted in terms of its contents, but the time frame around some of our recruitment has moved a bit just due to challenges that we faced. So our advanced clinical practice developments have 3 streams. We've got our advanced clinical pharmacy, allied health professionals and advanced nurse practitioner roles. You would have seen within the paper that our pharmacy developments are progressing. We've got a test of change within community mental health services, and there's a Scottish Government funded advanced pharmacy post that we're hoping to have someone in post for in April of this year. That's just looking at how the advanced pharmacists can basically alleviate some of the pressure on our psychiatrists within our mental health services. Unfortunately, our advanced allied health practitioner roles are not being progressed at the moment. Those would be new roles for us, completely new roles for us within Inverclyde, and we haven't identified a funding stream that would enable us to progress those. The biggest chunk of the paper relates to our advanced nursing practice roles. We initially proposed a team of 6. We do still hope to end up with a team of 6, but we've had some difficulties recruiting to the lead advanced nurse practitioner role and also to our qualified advanced nurse practitioner roles. I can identify with a lot of the comments that have been shared among other professions in terms of recruitment and retention of staff, and I think you know, that's obviously very much the same for us within nursing. We have had 2 trainee advanced nurse practitioners within mental health services in post since September. They have commenced their university programme and will be studying for 2 years. they're supported at the moment in the absence of a lead advanced nurse practitioner. They're supported by our inpatient service manager and also other advanced practice specialists from across Inverclyde and Greater Glasgow and Clyde. We've got obviously our primary care ANPs who we've linked in with Hospital at Night, and there are wider ANP developments within mental health services across Glasgow that we're connecting with. So basically, although our recruitment has delayed our initial plan, the plan remains the same, but just with a different timeline for having all the posts filled. Our lead advanced nurse practitioner role has actually been through 5 rounds of adverts. We've on 2 occasions identified preferred candidates, but for different reasons, that's not progressed to actually successfully appointing someone. Our last round closed on Friday, and I understand we've got potentially appointable candidates, so hopefully this time we'll be successful in recruiting to that lead post, because that will enable the service development work and the supervision of the trainee advanced nurse practitioners to be picked up by that lead advanced nurse practitioner. Happy to answer any questions.
Question from Charlene.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Gillian, for the report. I was just wondering, with specific reference to the advanced nurse practitioners in mental health, how does this piece of work, or these staff members, how do they set aside the earlier proposal that was sort of put on pause last year by the Scottish Government around the mental health and primary care service? I know the funding for that was paused. What do we anticipate that going forward alongside this, should the funding materialise, which is another question entirely? Just curious around how they sit together.
Yeah, our hope would be that the advanced nursing practice developments in mental health could cross all aspects of mental health. So at the moment it focuses on our inpatient services. They'd be able to pick up some of our medical roles that traditionally sit with medical staffing, which would alleviate some of the pressures on our medical staffing with an inpatient setting. But there's an aspiration that it would also work across community mental health services. And yes, should we be in a position where we can develop that primary care, mental health and wellbeing service, then there could potentially be a role for them to link in with that.
Thank you, Charlie. Anyone else got any questions on this report? No. Right, we just note that the contentious report, move on to the next item, which is item agenda 9. And it's the care home assurance tool teams trends, and it's Laura Moore. Laura?
Yes, thank you. It's quite a lengthy paper, so I'm going to take it as read, just run through some key points if that's okay. So the paper itself is presented for information and noting today, and basically it gives a summary of the spring and summer 2022 chat visits. So that's the care home assurance tool visits that we did during that period of time. So these visits are carried out by a team that has a senior nurse from the HSCP or the Care Home Collaborative, a social worker, and somebody from commissioning. And what we do is we work together with the homes. The homes do some self-assessment for us so that we're well prepared before we go in. And then we go into the homes and spend some time with the staff in the homes and the patients and any family members we can, looking at particular areas of practice. The tool that we use is a GGC-wide tool, and all of the reports are shared both with the care homes themselves and back to GGC and are then formed into an overarching report. There's 3 main areas we look at: infection prevention and control, the residents' health and care needs, and the workforce leadership and culture. And I think what we can see from this report is we picked up some really, really good areas of practice, particularly around IPC and in relation to that patient-centred care. I've put some quotes and things in there on page 72 of the overarching bundle, because I always think that gives us a little bit more flavour to what's actually going on in our homes, and it's really good to see some of the good practice. We were able to compare with previous visits. There are a few areas where the homes are still there were some recurring themes around their hand hygiene audit and things like cleaning schedules. that's more about the fact that they're doing the work, but they're not always documenting it. So just a bit of work going on with that. I've included a table of some of the training that's taken place from the Care Home Collaborative, which shows that they have responded to the last round of visits and put in the training that was required, which has been appreciated by the homes. In terms of feedback from the homes, they very much, we've had a lot of feedback to say that they find these visits really, really supportive. They feel that the staff, when we go in, that we're very approachable and give them some really good feedback. And we're continuing to work as a team on all of that, but also across the wider GGC to look at the format of these assurance visits in line with conversations around assurance for care homes with Scottish Government at the moment, to just make sure that we are fully aligned in our processes. So I think that's probably the main things that I wanted to say. But as we continue to do these visits every 6 months, and as I say, I'm constantly looking at how we gain feedback and develop the process to capture the best of our homes. Happy to take any questions.
Don't say in the chat, Laura. Has anybody got a question for Laura? Alan Stevenson.
Chair, through yourself, just to say, I meet with the care home managers. None of them work for the local authority, obviously, but they're all very appreciative of these. It's an extra line of assistance, support, and also the IGB can take that assurance. Not to be confused with the role of the care inspectorate. The care inspectorate have their own regime when they're going to look at inspecting a home in relation to the criteria they use, but it's certainly the care home managers have very much appreciated that additional nursing lens, particularly because I think that was missing before COVID. And that's one of the things I think we've learned. We've really benefited from having that professional nurse role around the care homes. So it's just really added that extra level of assurance. So it's just to give that level of assurance to the IGB today. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Hunt. Diana?
I wondered if Laura could remind us what the Care Home Collaborative model is that we're going forward with.
Yes, absolutely, Diana. So the Care Home Collaborative is a team that was put together through funding from Scottish Government. Over 3 million was received by GGC. And we've got sort of 3 hubs in relation to that. So Hub 5 is all of your HSCPs, and we host that in Inverclyde. We then have a Glasgow City hub, and then we have a hub of professionals that make up the collaborative. So we've got tissue viability specialist nurses, we have physical movement specialists and physios. We have support from infection prevention control team, palliative care. So a real team of experts who are commissioned purely to support all of the care homes across GGC. So pre the collaborative being set up, we didn't have that. You were often hoping that you could get some support from somebody in infection prevention control who was actually more focused on working in the acutes. So it's really given us that extra support, and it means that homes can refer themselves if they want some particular advice, or if they've identified an area they want to work through, or like we have done here at the end of these visits, we're able to say the collaborative, you know, some of our homes have said they would like some training on MUST 5 and food, fluid and nutrition, or confirmation of death or whatever, and they'll actually put that on for us. So it's really, really supportive.
All right, Diane?
Yes, thank you. I hope they're not funded by COVID.
They're not.
You're right. If I don't see any other questions in the chat or any hand raised, the recommendations recommended Integration Board receive report for information, note both the contents of report and the action detailed in paragraph 4.9 of report. Item 10 is the Chief Officer's report. Kate.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So just 3 items that I wanted to kind of highlight to the IGB. The first one is around CAM Specialist Children's Services. that within the GG&C Health Board, it's been agreed that there should be a single system management arrangement for specialist children's services, which includes CAMS and specialist community paediatrics teams. This is to bring together into a single management and financial structure the currently delegated Tier 3 specialist children's services and the board-wide hosted Tier 4 services, which are the intensive services, Sky House, the hospital-based services. The current arrangements are that Tier 4 and community paediatric services are aligned to the Chief Officer for East Dunbartonshire, and Tier 3 CAMS and community paediatric services are hosted within the 5 other HSEPs, and we have got them within Inverclyde. And there is a recommendation that they are intended to be consolidated by a formal hosting arrangement within East Dunbartonshire Health and Social Care Partnership. This includes consolidation of all the budgets supporting the delivery of these services and a refresh of the governance and reporting arrangements through East Dunbartonshire IGB and through other IGBs as part of a regular performance reporting. The principles that are supposed to guide this transition are services will continue to be delivered locally and by existing teams. Services will remain located within the current HSCPs. Services will continue to work closely in partnership with HSCP colleagues. There is a proposal that will be guided by a project plan which will be developed, which will include a consultation and engagement plan. Work will be inclusive of all key stakeholders and staff partnership colleagues, and an oversight group has been put in place to support the work with the representation of all HCCPs within the GGC area. The financial implications in the movement of the relevant budgets will be set out in more detail for a future report to the IGB. So I've just read it out as it is. I'm just curious to see if anyone has got any questions around that, and I can happy to kind of move on. The care at home review is progressing well. I made reference to it earlier on within our IGB discussions, particularly around recruitment and retention across the HSCP, and there's a number of work streams ongoing. The groups, the work streams have been working with the stakeholders, including staff side, and the report is just at the process of concluding a list of recommendation. Your voice is leading on service user consultation, which has been generally positive, but there is some concern obviously about continuity care when this service is redesigned, and a survey is available for both HSCP and the Commission staff, and consultation sessions led by staff side have been completed with pay rates and concerns about travel highlighted as the main issue. So one of the concerns that we've had is about the patches and how big the patches are, and actually we're now in a better position of trying to localise the patches so that the travelling is much less across Inverclyde, and there's been incredible work done around this. Anything that anyone wants to ask at this stage? No? And then I'll just add to the final bit that I wanted to highlight was my visit with Alan Cowan, who's the chair of the IGB. We visited the Inverclyde Centre just before Hogmanay and spent time with staff and a few residents. The outcome was fantastic. We really got a sense of all the work that they were doing to try and develop the service, particularly around the outreach component. Can I say that the limit of the service is around the physical environment of that building, and the building does not lend to the aspirations or the ambitions of the staff and the management to support the development of our homelessness approach in Inverclyde. I was quite taken with the compassion and values of the staff, and I think that's important that we acknowledge that. And I think if Alan Cowan had been here today, he would have also, you know, emphasised that, because this is contrary to some of the reports that we're seeing out there locally. But there needs to be some work. I mean, the design of the building is a major barrier, and there's no getting away with that to improving service delivery. A redesign proposal for the service will be presented to full council and IGB in June 2023, and that will include the proposals around the actual use of the building moving forward. So it was just to update the IGB of that, of this at this stage. Thank you, everyone.
Christina.
Thanks for that, Kate. In terms of the care at home review, every time I hear something is reviewed, I start to get twitchy, and I'm concerned that it might actually mean that some services are changed, improved, which in actual fact may mean they are being withdrawn. So carers who look after their loved one at home may have some of their care withdrawn as a result of some recommendations. You may decide that people don't need certain things, which is a problem. I know already that people who wish to get care have basically been told that you're prioritising getting people out of hospital, which is understandable. So if you are at what is assessed as the lower level of care, then you're unlikely to get it until you fall over in a heap and something terrible happens. Your loved one either goes into care, into hospital, or you do. So that there is concern out there that some people who are at what you will assess as a lower level aren't getting the help that they really need, and they're also concerned that they're just not going to be able to cope.
So can I know that Alan wants to come in, so that's not the purpose of the care at home review. It's about how we deliver the service, not necessarily about rationalising the service in any way. So we are currently carrying a significant number of vacancies, and we want to kind of look at the vacancies and develop a different workforce, which will include our kind of a look at our pay and our retention of staff to deliver and to make sure that we are having the coverage of it. We're carrying 70 vacancies at this moment in time. I will understand full-time or full-time equivalent 50 vacancies. So we're being very, very thoughtful about what we need moving forward based on data and analysis. Alan's waiting there patiently to come in, so I'll hand it over to him because he's leading on that work.
Thanks, Kate. Chair, through yourself, that was quite a bleak presentation there from Christina, so I want to give some assurance to the board. The numbers of people that we are supporting and continue to support in Inverclyde, about 1,200 people, 1,200 older people, and that lets we have a vast amount of people living at home because of the success of our care at home. So we're looking to improve that service, which doesn't mean cut it. It'll still be based on assessment, and people's needs will be assessed, and we'll always be looking to, where appropriate, bring in the potential work around the carers as well, carers assessments, and all those various things we can do. So just to give you assurance, it's not about cutting anything, it's about, we've got aspirations to be the best partnership in Scotland. I can continue to be one of the best about supporting people at home, because that's what families tell us. They tell us, we want my mum and dad to stay at home for as long as it's safe, and that's our aspiration, to make sure we continue to provide that. And through telecare, for overnight support teams who are out, if these teams weren't there, we wouldn't be able to support as many folk at home. We simply wouldn't be able to do it. So we're looking to make this the best service possible. But I think, as our chair has said, you can't keep doing the same things and expect a different outcome. And we've been trying really hard, but we are fishing from a small pond, and everyone's fishing from that pond, trying to attract staff. So part of the work we're doing in the social work training board's also aligned to that, about how do we make us an attractive organisation to come and workforce. So there's been a lot of work done. We'll continue to do work, and we'll be bringing that report forward, Christina, and I hope the content of that report will surprise you and you'll be happy with some of the recommendations in that direction of travel. We've always said the care at home service is the backbone of our social work service, and it is. It's incredible. So we're looking to make that be the best service possible, making sure we're securing the best outcomes and actually doing what people ask us to do, which is to make sure they can stay at home for as long as possible. Thanks.
I mean, that is comforting, but as I say, our concern is people who are at the lower end are just going to collapse in a heap and will go immediately from the lower end to the higher end simply because there's insufficient workers. Basically, that's a real concern.
Yes, so the whole proposal is to strengthen it and increase our workforce. And pay and retention is a huge bit about that, Christina, without getting into it. But Alan will be you'll be very much surprised when we get the report. Okay, any other questions?
Hi, Kate, it's Robert. It's on the homeless redesign. I think this is something that's been overdue for many years, and that centre has been there, and we've just sort of let it be there and not looked at it in any real detail, how we could fix the problems that's there. And it's not a fit for purpose building, because I know the building well. I mean, believe it or not, it used to be a Siemens mission, and we were the secret desk. We used to go there, go for a cup of tea at night after drill and stuff like that. It's been there so long, it's not fit for purpose. And I really do look forward to the presentation come June, you know, when you present the paper to the full council, and we could really move forward and do something about that homeless centre.
Thanks, Councillor Moran. We're looking forward to taking this paper too.
Thank you. Any other question for the Chief Officer? So that's fine. We'll go on to 10:11, which is the Inverclyde Integration Joint Board Audit Committee. I don't know if Olivia wants to sign on that. No. Very happy to note the report. We move on to agenda item 12, and then we're getting to private session where members of the public will have to